3 years had passed since Earth died. Dr. Lisa Harper wiped sweat from her forehead as she worked in the cramped laboratory of New Haven Colony. The space station was home to nearly 50,000 human refugees, all crammed into a facility that had been built for maybe 10,000. But it was home now. It was all they had. Lisa stared at the object on her workbench. It was about the size of a football, made of some kind of metal that seemed to shift colors when she was not looking. Directly at it, strange symbols covered its surface. Symbols that hurt her eyes if she stared at them too long. The artifact hummed with energy that made all their computers act strange. "Any luck with the translation?" asked Dr. Marcus Webb from the next table. "Over." Marcus was a quantum physicist who had lost his wife and 2 daughters when the HFY hit Chicago. He had not smiled once in 3 years, but he worked harder than anyone else in the colony. "Getting closer," Lisa said. "The language is unlike anything we've ever seen. It's like they wrote in mathematics and music at the same time." The artifact was one of 7 they had found, floating in deep space, near the coordinates from the mysterious transmission. Captain Jake Morrison had been right to follow that signal. It had led them to something incredible, something that might change everything. The objects came from a species the HFY called the predecessors. According to what little information they had found in captured HFY databases, the predecessors had vanished millions of years ago. They had been so advanced that even the HFY spoke of them with something close to fear. "Dr. Harper?" Commander Ryan Blake appeared in the doorway of the lab. The burn scars on his face had healed, but they still made him look fierce. Ryan was in charge of military operations for the colony, which mostly meant keeping everyone from going crazy while they waited to die. "What is it, Commander?" Lisa asked without looking up from her work. "We got word from the other colonies. The HFY have finished with Earth. They're moving on to the next system, Tau Ceti." Lisa felt her stomach drop. Tau Ceti had 3 billion people spread across 4 worlds. Good people. People who had no idea what was coming for them. "How long until they get there?" she asked. 6 months? Maybe less? Lisa looked down at the artifact in her hands. 6 months? That was not enough time to warn Tau Ceti, let alone help them fight. But maybe, just maybe, it was enough time to understand what the predecessors had left behind. "I need more time with these things," Lisa said. "And I need Marcus to help me." "What do you think they are?" Ryan asked. Lisa was quiet for a long moment. The truth was almost too big to believe. "I think they're instructions. A manual. The predecessors didn't just disappear, Commander. I think they became something else, something bigger. And they left these behind to help others follow the same path." Ryan frowned. "What kind of path?" "The kind that might let us fight back." Marcus looked up from his own work. "Lisa, you can't be serious. These readings are off the charts. The energy signatures don't match anything in our physics books." "That's exactly the point," Lisa said. "Our physics books were written by a species that couldn't even build a decent spaceship until 100 years ago. The predecessors were working with forces we don't even have names for." She pointed to a section of symbols on the artifact. "This part here talks about something they call harmony frequencies. Not sound, not radio waves. Something that works at the quantum level. Something that can affect the basic structure of reality itself." Ryan stepped closer. "Are you saying this is some kind of weapon?" "Not a weapon. Something much more powerful than that." Lisa's hands were shaking now. "Commander, what if I told you that the predecessors found a way to convince the universe that certain things simply could not happen? What if they could make enemy weapons forget how to fire? What if they could make shields protect their enemies instead of their makers?" The room went very quiet. Outside the lab, Lisa could hear the sounds of the colony going about its daily business. Children playing in the corridors, adults working to keep their small piece of humanity alive. All of them refugees, all of them waiting for the day when The Kethvar decided to come finish what they had started. That's impossible, Marcus said, but his voice was uncertain. So was faster-than-light travel, until we figured it out. So was nuclear fusion. So was spaceflight itself. Lisa picked up the artifact. The predecessors were millions of years ahead of us. If anyone could break the rules of physics, it would be them. Ryan sat down heavily in a nearby chair. Even if you're right, even if these things are some kind of superweapon, how long would it take to figure them out? How long to build them? I don't know, Lisa admitted. Maybe years, maybe decades. But Commander, this is the first real hope we've had since Earth fell. The first chance to hit back instead of just running. What do you need? Ryan asked. Time, resources, and permission to try something that might be very dangerous. Dangerous how? Lisa hesitated. The truth was, she was not entirely sure what would happen if they tried to activate one of the artifacts. The energy readings suggested power levels that could level mountains, or worse. The artifacts seemed to respond to conscious thought, she said finally. To use them, someone would have to make direct mental contact, connect their brain to something that operates on principles we don't understand. Marcus looked up sharply. Lisa, that could kill whoever tries it. Maybe. Or maybe. It could give us the power to save 3 billion people in Tau Ceti, and maybe, someday, take back Earth. Ryan was quiet for a long time. Finally, he stood up. Do it. Whatever you need, you have it. Full colony resources. Commander, the risk. The risk of doing nothing is higher, Ryan said firmly. We've been running for 3 years. Maybe it's time to see if we can learn to fight. After Ryan left, Lisa and Marcus worked in silence for several hours. The symbols on the artifact seemed to shift and change as Lisa studied them, as if they were trying to teach her something, as if they wanted to be understood. Lisa, Marcus said suddenly, look at this. He had connected one of the smaller artifacts to their quantum computer. The screen showed patterns of energy that pulsed like a heartbeat, like something alive. It's responding to our presence, Marcus whispered. It knows we're here. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. The predecessors had been gone for millions of years, but somehow their technology was still waiting. Still, hoping that someone would come along who was ready to learn. Still hoping that someone would be worthy of the power to rewrite reality itself. Marcus, Lisa said quietly, I think we're about to become something more than human. Outside the lab, the colony continued its quiet existence. But in that small room, 2 refugees from a dead world stood on the edge of a discovery that would change the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. The predecessors had left them more than artifacts. They had left them a choice, a chance to become something the Kethvar had never faced before, a chance to become hope itself. The asteroid field looked like a graveyard of broken stone floating in empty space. Captain Karen Stone guided her reconnaissance ship Silent Runner between the massive rocks, following the signal that had led them here. Behind her, 12 other human vessels moved carefully through the dangerous field, their sensors scanning for the source of the transmission. Contact ahead, reported Navigator Bill Hayes from his station. It's big, Captain. Bigger than anything we've seen before. Karen leaned forward in her command chair. Through the front window, she could see something that made her breath catch in her throat. It was a structure the size of a small moon, carved directly into the largest asteroid in the field. Strange lights pulsed along its surface in patterns that seemed almost alive. My God, whispered Chief Engineer Sam Martinez. How old is this thing? Old enough to make the Kethvar look like children playing with toys? Karen said. She had been fighting the crystal-skinned aliens for 3 years now, ever since the evacuation fleets had found weapons and started hitting back. But this was different. This felt ancient. Important. Captain, we're getting a signal from Dr. Webb. Communications Officer Jenny Park announced. He says he's ready to try making contact with the main consciousness matrix. Karen nodded. Marcus Webb had volunteered for the most dangerous job in human history. After months of studying the smaller predecessor artifacts, he believed he could connect his mind directly to their technology. The process might kill him. It might drive him insane. But it was their best chance to understand what the predecessors had left behind. "Put him through," Karen said. Marcus appeared on the main screen, standing in the laboratory section of the research ship Discovery. He looked calm, but Karen could see the fear in his eyes. Behind him, Dr. Lisa Harper worked at a control panel covered in alien symbols. "Dr. Webb, are you sure about this?" Karen asked. Marcus smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Captain, I lost my family to the Kethvar 3 years ago. If there's a chance this technology can prevent other families from suffering the same loss, then it's worth the risk." "The quantum field generators are ready," Lisa reported. "Marcus, remember what we practiced. Don't try to control the connection. Let it guide you." Marcus walked to the center of the room, where a large predecessor artifact sat on a metal pedestal. It was roughly human-shaped, made of the same color-shifting metal as all their technology. As Marcus approached, the artifact began to glow with soft blue light. "Here we go," Marcus said. He reached out and placed both hands on the artifact's surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Marcus went completely rigid. His eyes rolled back until only the whites showed. The artifact's glow became brighter, and strange energy began to dance around Marcus's body like living lightning. "Marcus!" Lisa shouted, moving toward him. "No!" Marcus's voice was different now, deeper and echoing strangely. "Don't interrupt. The connection. I can see everything." Karen watched in fascination and terror as Marcus began to change. His hair turned white in the space of seconds. His skin took on a faint blue glow that matched the artifact. But most disturbing of all were his eyes. When they rolled back to normal, they were no longer completely human. Flecks of the same ethereal blue that pulsed in the artifact now swirled in his irises. "Marcus, can you hear me?" Lisa asked carefully. "I can hear you. I can hear the stars themselves." Marcus's voice was still his own, but there was something vast behind it now, something that had seen the birth and death of galaxies. "Lisa, they're still here, the predecessors. They didn't die, they became something else." "What do you mean?" Karen asked. Marcus turned to face the screen, and Karen had to resist the urge to step back. His new eyes seemed to look right through her, seeing things she could not imagine. They transcended physical existence, became pure consciousness. But before they left, they prepared for this moment. They knew that someday, younger species would face the same choice they once faced. "What choice?" Karen asked. "The choice between destruction and harmony." The Kethvar chose destruction. They became consumers, taking everything and giving nothing back. But there is another way. Marcus walked to another control panel and placed his hands on it. Immediately, the lights in the room changed, becoming softer and more welcoming. Throughout the asteroid structure, ancient systems began to activate for the first time in millions of years. The predecessors called it the deep harmony, Marcus continued. "It's not about forcing your will on the universe. It's about convincing reality that some things are simply true, that weapons of hate cannot function, that shields of fear must protect their enemies, that those who have forgotten their better nature will remember it again." "You're talking about rewriting the laws of physics," Sam said over the communication link. "No. I'm talking about reminding the universe what those laws were always meant to serve." Marcus's strange new eyes grew distant. "The Kethvar were not always monsters, Captain Stone. Once, long ago, they were gardeners. They grew beautiful things on 1,000 worlds, but they encountered corrupted predecessor technology and misunderstood its purpose. They thought power meant taking. They forgot that true power means giving. Karen felt her heart racing. Are you saying we can change them back? The deep harmony doesn't change anyone against their will. It simply removes the barriers that prevent them from seeing clearly. It strips away fear and hunger and desperation and shows beings who they really are underneath all that pain. Lisa stepped closer to Marcus, studying the readings on her instruments. The energy levels are incredible. Marcus, how do you feel? Different. Expanded. Like I was living in a small room my entire life and someone just showed me there were windows. Marcus looked down at his hands, which now glowed with the same soft blue light as the artifacts. I can feel the quantum connections between all living things. I can sense the Kethavar fleet 3 systems away, and the pain that drives them forward. Pain? Karen asked. They're dying, Captain. Their home system is failing. They consume other worlds because they believe it's the only way to survive. But they're wrong. The deep harmony can heal their world. It can heal all worlds. Marcus walked to the largest control console in the room and began working with movements that seemed guided by instinct rather than knowledge. Ancient screens flickered to life, showing star maps and energy patterns that span the galaxy. The predecessor network is vast, Marcus said. Stations like this one exist near every major star system, all dormant, all waiting for someone worthy to activate them. Worthy how? Karen asked. Marcus smiled, and for a moment he looked like his old self again. Someone who chooses to heal rather than harm, someone who offers hope instead of fear, someone who remembers that the strongest force in the universe isn't destruction. What is it then? Lisa asked. The choice to be better than you were yesterday, the decision to help others become better too. The predecessors learned that consciousness itself is the most powerful force in existence, and they built a network that lets consciousness reshape reality. Through the asteroid field, the ancient station continued to wake up. Lights flowed along pathways carved in stone millions of years ago. Energy patterns that had waited in darkness began to sing with power. Marcus turned back to the screen, his new eyes bright with possibility. Captain Stone, we need to gather the fleet, all of them. It's time to go home. Home? Karen asked. It's time to liberate Earth, and it's time to remind the Kethvar who they used to be. Captain Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold glass of the observation deck. Behind him, the evacuation ship Horizon's Edge hummed with the quiet desperation of 2,000 souls who had lost everything. In front of him, Earth grew, smaller with each passing second, becoming nothing more than a blue dot in the endless black of space. He could still hear the screams. Even here, millions of miles away from home, Jake could hear the last sounds of his dying world echoing in his mind. The Kethvar had come without warning, their massive crystal ships appearing in Earth's sky like silver tears in reality itself. They had not asked for surrender. They had not demanded resources or territory. They had simply begun killing. Sir? Lieutenant Amy Richardson's voice was soft behind him. She had been one of the lucky ones, pulled from the ruins of New York just hours before the city turned to glass. Her uniform was still dirty with ash and dust from the streets where she had grown up. The final count is in. Jake turned away. From the window. Amy's eyes were red from crying, but her voice stayed steady. She was a good soldier. They were all good soldiers now. They had to be. How many? Jake asked, though he already knew the answer would break something inside him. That might never heal. 2 million across all evacuation fleets. Maybe a little more. Amy's hands shook as she held the data pad. Out of 8 billion people. Jake closed his eyes. 8 billion. The number was too big to understand, too big to feel. It was easier to think about the faces he remembered. His wife, Sarah, who had been visiting her sister in Chicago when the first wave hit. His son, Danny, away at college in Boston. The mailman who had waved at him every morning for 15 years. The barista who always remembered his coffee order. All of them gone. All of them turned to ash and memory in the space of 3 days. The HFY had moved across Earth like a machine. Their energy weapons had carved through cities as if they were made of paper. Tanks, jets, nuclear missiles, nothing had even scratched their shields. Humanity's greatest weapons had been as useful as throwing rocks at the moon. "Sir, we're getting signals from the other evacuation ships," Communications Officer Pete Johnson called from his station. His voice cracked on every third word. Pete was only 19 years old. He should have been worried about college exams and first dates, not coordinating the funeral of his entire species. "What do they say?" Jake asked. "Admiral Collins wants all fleet commanders to meet at Proxima Station. She says we need to plan what comes next." "What comes next?" Jake almost laughed. What came next was dying slowly in space stations and colony ships, watching their children grow up as refugees while the HFY stripped Earth of everything useful and moved on to their next target. What came next was the end of everything that had ever mattered. But Jake was a captain, and captains did not give up, not when their crew needed them, not when 2,000 people looked to him for hope he did not have. "Tell Admiral Collins we'll be there," Jake said. "How long until we reach the station?" "6 hours at current speed," Pete replied. 6 hours. Jake nodded and walked to the center of the bridge. Around him, men and women worked at their stations with the mechanical precision of people trying not to think about what they had lost. The bridge was quiet except for the soft beeping of computers and the distant hum of the ship's engines. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Blake stood near the tactical station, staring at a display that showed the positions of all known HFY ships. Ryan had been on the ground during the final battle for Washington, D.C. Half his face was covered in burn scars from a HFY energy blast that had missed killing him by inches. He had not spoken about what he had seen there, but sometimes Jake caught him staring at nothing with eyes that had seen too much. "How many of their ships are still in Earth orbit?" Jake asked. Ryan looked up from his display. 17 that we can detect. Probably more we can't see. They're setting up some kind of processing stations. Processing stations. The words made Jake's stomach turn. The HFY were not just conquerors, they were harvesters. They turned entire worlds into raw materials for their endless expansion across the galaxy. In a few months, there would be nothing left of Earth but empty space and distant memories. "Sir," Amy said quietly, "there's something else. We picked up a transmission before we jumped to hyperspace. It was in English." Jake turned to look at her. "English? From who?" "We don't know. It was heavily encrypted and very short. Just coordinates. And a single word." Amy paused as if she was afraid to say what came next. The word was hope. Hope. Jake had almost forgotten what that word meant. For 3 days, hope had been nothing more than getting one more family onto an evacuation ship. One more child away from the falling cities. One more group of refugees off the dying world. But this was different. This was someone, somewhere, saying that maybe the story was not over yet. "Do we know where those coordinates point?" Jake asked. "Deep space. About 40 light years from Earth. There's nothing on our star charts. Nothing on their charts. But someone had taken the time to send coordinates to the fleeing human ships. Someone who knew enough about human encryption to make sure the message would be understood. Someone who thought there was still something worth fighting for." Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. They were tired and scared and broken. They had watched their world die and barely escaped with their lives. But they were still here. They were still human. And humans had never been very good at giving up, even when giving up was the smart thing to do. "Set course for those coordinates," Jake ordered. "After we meet with Admiral Collins." "Sir?" Amy looked confused. "Do you think it's safe? It could be a trap?" Jake turned back to the observation window. Earth was gone now, lost among the stars. But somewhere out there, someone was still fighting. Someone still had hope. And if there was, even the smallest chance that humanity could hit back at the monsters who had taken everything, then they had to try. Maybe it's a trap, Jake said quietly. But right now, it's the only lead we have. And I'll be damned if I'm going to spend the rest of my life running from the things that killed my world. The Horizon's Edge continued on its course toward Proxima Station, carrying its cargo of survivors and refugees toward an uncertain future. Behind them, Earth burned. Ahead of them lay only questions and the faint possibility of answers. But for the first time in 3 days, Captain Jake Morrison felt something other than despair. It was not much. It was barely there at all. But it was enough to keep moving forward. It was hope. The battle had been raging for 18 hours across 17 star systems. Admiral Susan Blake watched from Luna Station as her impossible fleet fought an enemy that had never known defeat. Her command center was filled with displays showing fights that existed in multiple dimensions and several different time streams at once. "Report from the Harbinger," announced Captain Julie Henderson, Blake's second in command. "They have successfully moved the entire Centauri system to a pocket dimension. 4 billion civilians are safe, but we have lost contact with Commander Jackson's ship." Blake nodded without taking her eyes off the main tactical display. The strategy was working, but the cost was terrible. Each time they used the reality-bending weapons, space itself became less stable. Some areas of the galaxy were now so twisted that normal physics no longer applied. "Admiral," called out Dr. Cross from his science station, "I am detecting something strange in the Devourer attack patterns. They are showing signs of confusion and disorder." Blake looked at the tactical display more carefully. The enemy ships, that had moved in perfect formation, were now scattered and disorganized. Some vessels were firing on their own allies. Others had simply stopped moving and were floating dead in space. "They cannot process what we are doing," Blake realized. Their computer systems are designed to analyze and counter normal warfare. But nothing we are doing makes sense by their standards. Captain Hughes's voice crackled over the communication system from somewhere deep in folded space. "Blake, the Blackwater has found something. We have made contact with what appears to be the Devourer command ship. It is bigger than a moon, and it wants to talk." Blake felt her heart racing. In all the records they had found from other galaxies, no one had ever reported the Devourers attempting communication. They simply consumed everything in their path without explanation or negotiation. "Put it through to the main screen," Blake ordered. The view screen filled with an image that made everyone in the command center step backward. Geometric patterns shifted and flowed in ways that hurt to look at directly. The shape suggested intelligence, but intelligence so alien that human minds could barely comprehend it. When it spoke, the words seemed to bypass language entirely and appear directly in their thoughts. "We are the efficiency," the entity said. The voice felt like ice water flowing through Blake's brain. "We consume, we optimize, we process. We cannot understand your methods. You violate fundamental constants. This should not be possible according to universal law." Blake stepped forward, forcing herself to look directly at the alien intelligence. "We are humanity. We break rules when we need to. We ignore the impossible when it gets in our way. We do whatever it takes to protect the people we love." "Your weapons operate outside known parameters," the entity continued. "Your tactics defy logical analysis. Your survival instinct appears to exceed thermodynamics. This does not compute. Explain your impossible nature." Blake felt a strange moment of understanding. The Devourers were not evil in any way humans could recognize. They were simply following their programming, like a computer virus that consumed data. They had become so focused on efficiency that they had forgotten any other way of thinking. "We do not optimize for efficiency," Blake replied carefully. "We optimize for hope. Sometimes that means building weapons that should not exist. Sometimes it means breaking laws that everyone agrees are necessary. Sometimes it means fighting, battles that we cannot possibly win. The entity paused, its geometric patterns slowing and shifting. You have weaponized irrationality. This paradigm was not considered in our operational parameters. We have weaponized humanity, Blake corrected, and we will keep doing it for as long as we need to. Around the galaxy, the Devourer ships had stopped their attacks completely. They were no longer trying to consume planets or engage the Allied fleet. Instead, they seemed to be analyzing everything that had happened, trying to understand how their perfect logic had been defeated by pure chaos. This paradigm requires processing time, the entity announced. The efficiency must analyze new data sets before proceeding. Your impossible variables have created computational errors in our core systems. We withdraw to debug our operational matrix. Blake could hardly believe what she was hearing. The ancient enemy that had consumed entire galaxies was retreating, because they could not understand human stubbornness. All Devourer units return to staging areas, the entity commanded. Initiate deep analysis protocols. Study the chaos variables introduced by impossible species designation, humanity. Time frame for analysis, undetermined. Across the galaxy, the nightmare ships began to simply vanish. They did not retreat through hyperspace or any method the Allied fleet could track. They folded away into dimensions that had no names, leaving behind empty space where moments before, the greatest threat in galactic history had been preparing to consume everything. All ships, stand down from combat alert, Blake broadcast to the fleet. Begin recovery operations for displaced systems and personnel. The command center erupted in cheers, but Blake felt strangely empty. They had won, but she was not sure if their victory would last. The Devourers were still out there somewhere trying to understand what had happened to them. Captain Hughes materialized on the command deck in a column of purple energy. His black uniform was torn and his face was exhausted, but he was smiling. "Think, they will come back?" he asked. Blake looked out at the stars, where human ships were working alongside alien vessels to restore the systems that had been displaced during the battle. Ships that had been hidden in pocket dimensions were returning to normal space. Planets that had been moved to safety were being put back in their proper orbits. "Probably," she admitted. "But when they return, they will find that we have had time to break a few more rules." Hughes laughed tiredly. "The Galactic Council is already drafting new treaties. Apparently, they want to regulate impossible weapons and prevent anyone from using reality-bending technology without proper authorization." Blake shook her head in amazement. "Let them try. By the time they finish writing the regulations, we will have invented 6 new ways to make the impossible seem routine." She turned to address the command center, where officers from dozens of species were working side by side. Many of them had never spoken to each other before this crisis, but now they were cooperating like they had been allies for years. "This is Admiral Blake to all ships and stations," she announced. "Today we accomplished something that should have been impossible. The galaxy remains free because humanity refused to accept the limitations that others placed on us. We proved that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from following the rules, but from breaking them so completely that your enemies cannot understand what you have done." Dr. Cross looked up from his analysis of the battle data. "Admiral, I am detecting something interesting in the quantum signatures left behind by the Devourer ships. It appears their withdrawal has actually stabilized some of the damaged areas of space-time." Blake nodded. Even in retreat, the universe seemed to be healing itself. "Send that data to all Allied ships. We need to understand every aspect of what happened here." The war was over, at least for now. The warship that broke. Every law of war had become the foundation of a new kind of defense. A defense built on humanity's greatest strength, their absolute refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible when the survival of everything they loved was at stake. And somewhere in the darkness between dimensions, an ancient intelligence struggled to comprehend a species that had weaponized hope itself. wondering if perhaps efficiency was not the only path to survival in a universe full of impossible things. Commander Pete Jackson stood on the bridge of the UES Harbinger and looked out at the strangest fleet ever assembled. Ships from 47 different species floated in formation near the edge of the Helix Nebula. Each vessel had been modified, with human technology that made experienced officers feel sick just looking at it. The Harbinger was one of 12 ships built using Blackwater technology. Its hull was dark gray instead of black, and strange energy patterns flickered along its sides. Jackson could feel the ship humming around him with barely controlled power. The engines used energy from places that should not exist. The weapons could hit targets in other dimensions. Even the life support systems worked by bending the rules of physics. "Status report," Jackson called out to his crew. "Lieutenant Commander." Rachel Martinez looked up from her station. She was the ship's second-in-command and had volunteered for this mission even though everyone knew it was probably suicide. "All fleet elements report ready, sir. The Devourer advanced scouts will reach the Proxima system in 37 minutes. Jackson nodded and looked around his bridge. His crew was made up of officers from 6 different species. At the navigation station sat Ensign Clix, a Cathari insectoid who could calculate hyperspace jumps faster than any computer. Lieutenant Vex, a blue-skinned Andorian, managed the weapon systems. Even with their different appearances, they all had the same expression, of nervous determination. Through the main view screen, Jackson could see the other ships in humanity's Ghost Fleet. The name had stuck after someone pointed out that their vessels existed partially outside normal space-time. Each ship bristled with weapons that the Galactic Council had reluctantly authorized for this specific battle, matter disruptors that could unmake enemy vessels atom by atom, temporal shields that let them exist in multiple time streams at once, quantum cannons that could shoot through folded space to hit targets light years away. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from Admiral Blake," reported communications specialist Kevin Torres. Blake's image appeared on the main screen. She looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes showed she had not slept in days. Behind her, the command center of Luna Station buzzed with activity as hundreds of technicians monitored the galaxy's defenses. "All ships, this is Admiral Blake," she began. "Long-range sensors confirm the approach of the main Devourer force. We count over 10,000 vessels of unknown design. They have consumed 17 outer rim colonies and are accelerating toward Chi. Core systems at impossible speeds." Jackson felt his stomach drop. The combined galactic fleet had only 800 ships. Even with their new technology, the odds were terrible. "Remember," Blake continued, "normal tactics will not work against this enemy. They learn from every attack, adapt to our weapons, and use destroyed matter to make themselves stronger. We must be unpredictable, impossible to understand, and willing to do things that make no sense." Dr. Nathan Cross appeared beside Blake on the transmission. His face was pale but determined. "The Devourers operate on pure logic. They seek maximum efficiency in everything they do. Our advantage lies in humanity's greatest strength, our willingness to do the impossible when we have no other choice." Captain Hughes' voice crackled over the communication system from somewhere in folded space. The Blackwater was already moving between dimensions, preparing for an attack that would come from 17 different directions at once. "All ships, prepare for quantum displacement," Hughes announced. "We are going to hit them using tactics that should not work according to any known laws of physics. Trust your instruments even when they tell you impossible things." Jackson gripped his command chair as reality began to bend around the Harbinger. The ship did not move through space in any normal way. Instead, it convinced space to move around it. The stars outside twisted into long streaks of light. For a moment, Jackson felt like he was falling through dimensions that had no names. When the sensation stopped, the fleet had scattered across 3 star systems. Each group was ready to attack the Devourers from a different angle. Some ships were hiding in the corona of stars. Others floated in the empty space between planets. A few had positioned themselves inside asteroid fields where they could not be detected by normal sensors. "Sir," called out Ensign Maria Santos from the tactical station, "I am reading massive energy signatures approaching. The Devourers are here." Jackson looked at the tactical display and felt his blood turn cold. The enemy ships looked like geometric nightmares. They were not built so much as grown, with surfaces that absorbed all light and energy. They moved in perfect formation, thousands of vessels acting as one mind. Each ship was different, but they all radiated the same horrible wrongness. "All ships," Jackson broadcast on the fleet frequency, "remember what we are fighting for, not just our laws or our territories, but our right to exist as chaotic, unpredictable, gloriously illogical beings." The first Devourer ship to enter the system was the size of a small moon. It immediately began scanning for targets, its sensors, reaching out like invisible hands to probe every planet and asteroid. When it found the human colony on Proxima 3, it moved toward the planet with terrible purpose. Jackson watched as the monster ship began to extend long tentacles of energy toward the planet's surface. He knew what would happen next. The Devourers would drain every living thing on the world, converting biological matter into pure energy for their use. "Fire quantum torpedoes," Jackson ordered. "Target their power core." The Harbinger's weapons fired, but not through normal space. The torpedoes traveled through folded dimensions, appearing inside the Devourer ship without crossing the distance between them. The enemy vessel shuddered as explosions erupted throughout its hull, but instead of being destroyed, the Devourer ship began to adapt. Its hull flowed like liquid metal, repairing the damage and changing its structure to resist further attacks of the same type. Within seconds, it had evolved a defense against quantum weapons. "Sir, our attack had no lasting effect," Santos reported. "The enemy ship is actually stronger than before." Jackson smiled grimly. "That is exactly what we expected. Ensign Clicks, execute pattern Delta 7. The Cathari officer's compound eyes glittered as he worked the navigation controls. "Pattern Delta 7 executed, sir." Suddenly, the Harbinger began to exist in 7 different locations at the same time. The Devourer ship tried to target all 7 versions, but could not determine which one was real. Its logical systems overloaded trying to process the impossible situation. "All ships," Jackson broadcast, "execute random pattern changes. Do not let them predict our movements." Across the 3-star systems, the galactic fleet began to fight using tactics that defied understanding. Ships appeared and disappeared without warning. Weapons fired through dimensions that should not exist. Some vessels split into multiple copies of themselves, while others merged together to form larger ships that immediately split apart again. The Devourers had never faced an enemy that refused to make sense. Their perfect logic systems began to stutter and fail as they tried to analyze attacks that had no pattern. For the first time in millions of years, the unstoppable force had met something it could not understand. Jackson watched as more Devourer ships entered the system, their formation breaking apart as they struggled to adapt to the chaos around them. The battle for the galaxy's survival had begun, and humanity was fighting it with the only weapon that had ever worked against perfect logic, perfect madness.